fighting on death is one of the strongest melee mechanics in all of Warhammer 40,000, and almost nobody is playing it correctly. Some players are actually cheating themselves out of freaking damage, and others are cheating their opponents by accident. And most people have absolutely no idea how much value this rule actually creates. And trust me, if you're not utilizing this thing correctly, you're not winning games that you really should be winning. So today we're going to be breaking down exactly how Fight on Death works, the mistakes you must stop making, and the advanced plays that are going to let top players flip entire combats using a single dying unit. In addition to this, what I want you to recognize, what I also want you to know is that today I'm going to be using the TTS to actually demonstrate how to move your models with a Fight on Death and how to actually do it. So it's not just talking about it, I'm actually going to show you how to do it as well. So stick around for that. That'll be towards the end. All right, so let's just get right on into the freaking video. This is freaking Fight on Death, so let's do it. So what Fight on Death actually is, and this is a big deal, okay? Fighting on Death is not going to be like a normal melee activation, but it's going to be treated fairly similarly to such. All right, so you're not actually activating a unit. You're activating specific models that were destroyed. And what is important to note is that all Fight on Death abilities, regardless of whether it's coming from a strat, a normal datasheet ability, or however it is worded, there is a rules commentary clause that explains how it works, and they all work the same way. Some of them might go off on a 4+ versus a 3+ versus automatic, but that would be the only real effective difference between their Fighting on Death. So, models fight, not units. This is the critical part that most people get wrong. Only the models that die actually get to pile in and fight, and the survivors don't do anything until the unit activates. The reason why this is so critically important is there is a difference between abilities that your units can use versus abilities that your models can use. So let me give you the example of an Adeptus Custode model in the Lions of the Emperor detachment or Solar Spearhead detachment that is fighting on death. Well, they can actually not use the army rule for the Adeptus Custodes, which would be the Martial Katas, because, and here's why. Each time a unit from your army with this ability is selected to fight, when your models are fighting on death, your unit is not being selected to fight. Because what actually happens is your opponent will make all of their attacks, your models die, they will count, in quotation marks, as being on 1 wound left, until your opponent is done making all of their attacks. Then your models that fight on death fight, then they are removed from the battlefield, and then the attacking unit will actually go ahead and be making their pile-in maneuvers. I'm going to show you on TTS here in just a second, so that is not confusing. But the reason why this is critically important is, let's say there's a unit of 5 Custodian Guard. Your opponent charges them, and 3 of the Custodian Guard die, and all 3 of them fight on death. Well, they do not get to benefit from the Martial Kata, which is the ability to choose sustained hits or lethal hits, because their unit is not being selected to fight when the models are fighting on death. And this has to be true, because even after those 3 models die, later on in the fight phase, the 2 who survived do still get to activate. Had the unit been selected to fight earlier, then those 2 models would not be able to select it afterwards. So obviously the 3 models that fight on death is not the unit being selected. They are just the models that are being selected. And I'm going to go into in-depth detail and demonstration on this so that you guys don't get confused. Now, there's a big difference between a faction ability that says, hey, units from your army with this ability, so they would not get the sustained hits, and then a detachment or a rule that says models get the ability. So let me give you another example. So I have this down here for you. This is for the Orc Warhorde detachment. It says melee weapons equipped by orcs models from your army have the sustained hits 1. So in this scenario, if orcs were fighting on death with this rule, they would get sustained hits because the models get the ability, versus Custodes, who they would only get the sustained hits if the unit is being selected. Right? So that is going to be the major difference. So this makes a really big deal on like a bunch of different army rules. So whether it's going to be, there's some Sisters of Battle interactions here. There's also going to be some Chaos Space Marines actions over here. So there's lots of different things that do interact with Fight and Death on different ways. So make sure you're reading whether it's affecting the unit or the model. Let's move on. How Fight on Death works step by step. So I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to show it to you. Okay? This is the way it's freaking going to go. Step 1. Model's destroyed, do not remove it. Leave the model on the table until after it fights. It still counts as being on 1 wound until the moment its attack's resolved. Step 2, your opponent finishes all of their attacks. So your opponent piles in, they finish all of their attacks. You don't interrupt their sequence. You let them finish their full profile, all the spillover, the mortals, everything's. And then in step 3, the destroyed models, the models that were just destroyed from your unit that get to fight on death, whether you have to do it on a 4-up or it's automatic, they will then pile in and fight because they go through the normal fight sequence. So they still pile in, up to 3 inches, and it still follows all the normal rules for piling in. You still have to pile in towards the closest enemy model, and you still have to maintain unit coherency when you do it. So that is the key. Then after the unit makes its attacks, the model that was fighting on death, not the unit, sorry, jeez, I shouldn't use that confusing language. So after the model that fought on death does its pile in and makes its attacks, it is then removed from the battlefield. After all the models remove their battlefield for step 4, then the original attacking unit, the enemy who charged you in the first place, or fought first in the first place, then does their consolidation. So your models actually fight on death before the attacking enemy unit consolidates. Now, some of that might have been confusing, so I'm just going to switch right on over to the TTS screen right now so I can do this for you in live action. And here we go. So I've got a unit of Victrix Guard, and they are going to be charging into these orc knobs. All right. So Victrix Guard charge in. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Bada bing, bada boom. Let's say they only kill 4 knobs. Boom, 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 boom. So these 4 knobs die. They finish all their attacks, and just through some unreasonable whatever thing, the knobs somehow magically survive. So they only kill these 4 knobs. Now that they're done with their fighting, these 4 knobs that are dead will pile on in, and they will all make all of their attacks. Then, after they've made their attacks, let's say they killed 2 Victorious Guards, because they should actually kill 3, which is kind of hilarious. So we'll say they kill all 3. Now, after all 3 Victrix Guard have then been killed, now the Victrix Guard finish their activation of the consolidation. Later on in the fight sequence, this orc knob unit will then get to activate. That's the way this works. Okay, so now that we clear that up, let's go ahead and get back to the video. We're going to finish this thing off, and we're going to make sure that everyone has strong understanding and everyone's happy and the world is full of love and sunshine. All right, so let's talk about leader and buff interactions. This is actually pretty darn important. Because your destroyed models have not been removed yet, they still count as part of a unit led by a character. This means that fight on death auras, the models are actually still benefiting from them. All right, so during fight on death, you're still benefiting from auras and leader buffs. If you have Oath of Moment, you still get to benefit from that because that applies to the models. Hit and wound modifiers from leaders. So like in the case of the knobs that we just demonstrated, they would still get +1 to hit from being led by the war boss, because rules wise they are still existing as an exactly 1 wound model until their attacks resolve, and then they disappear. This is a really big deal for a lot of units, especially units that get stronger as their units deplete. So if you're playing let's say a unit that gets stronger when they are below half strength, well, if your models are all dead, you count as destroyed, even though you also count as being on 1 wound for the purpose of remaining on the table. You would get the benefit of being under half strength, so you could get a +1 to wound. Let's say you're led by an Ancient, or you're playing Hallowed Martyrs, Sisters of Battle. This is a very important thing that you have to recognize, and if you haven't been utilizing this, you've been shortchanging yourself. All right, so let's talk about some common misplays with fights on deaths. Common misplay number 1. Picking up models too early. This is a really big deal, because if you're on the tabletop and you remove a model, you're not going to know where that model was, because your model still has to follow the normal rules for pile-ins. You can't just pick them up and be like, oh, I think they would have piled in over here. No, because you still have to measure to see what is the closest enemy model for the pile-in activation, because even though you're fighting on death, you still have to pile in correctly. You still have to go into the correct unit. Let's say there's 2 enemy units that are nearby, and the models are, you're not really quite sure which model is closest. Well, you're going to have to measure that to see which enemy model is the closest, which is the one that you'll have to pile into, which is where you'll be directing your attacks. So don't just pick your model up as soon as it's dead when you're using your fight on death ability. You have to make sure that you pile in correctly. Okay, common misplay number 2. You're treating it like a full unit activation. It is not. Only the destroyed models are fighting, not the whole unit, not the survivors, and not the leader unless he died. Fight on death is model-based, not unit-based. Keep that in mind. And then we got a common misplay number 3. Illegal freaking pile-ins. You can pile in, but you have to obey all the standard pile-in rules. You got to move towards the closest enemy unit, maintain unit coherency. You can pile into a different unit other than the one that charged you or that you charged, blah, 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 all these things. But you have to still follow the normal rules, and you can't ever pull yourself out of coherency. Of course, after you're dead, coherency doesn't matter because then you're dead, and then you remove your models. So let's talk about some of the pro plays that we like to use for Fight on Death to really get around a lot of super vital scenarios. So, pro play number 1, trade up even when you die. You can take fights on charges knowing, if he kills me, I still kill him back. This creates trades that your opponent cannot match because your unit effectively gets, a bonus fight step instead of just one. This is one of the strongest value engines in melee heavy armies. So let me kind of give you an example of this. You can also be stronger on Fight on Death sometimes. So in this exact same scenario, I'm just going to switch the screen for just a moment, not to distract, but I want to make sure you guys understand this. When these Victrix Honor Guard charge into the knobs, and the knobs fight on death, what's really interesting about this is when the knobs models are fighting on death, the Victrix Honor Guard cannot use Armor of Contempt against them. The reason for this is because the stratagem Armor of Contempt can only work when the Victrix Honor Guard or the Space Marines unit in general is selected as the target of an enemy unit's attacks. And these knobs, when they're fighting on death, specifically when they're fighting on death, are activating as individual models, not a enemy unit. This is critical for you to understand because the Victrix Honor Guard cannot use Armor of Contempt against these attacks, meaning the knobs are actually stronger into Victrix Honor Guard when they're fighting on death than when they're activating normally, because typically the Victrix Honor Guard would love to use an Armor of Contempt so that they would save on 3-ups against the Power Claws instead of 4-ups like they do on Fight on Death. This 5-man squad is actually typically going to hit harder when it's fighting on death than otherwise. So that's a really important thing that you have to understand about the game, about fighting on death. Okay, cool. So we got that one down. Pro play number 2. We're going to punish bad sequencing when the opponents activate into fight on death units too early. This is a really, really, really big one. If they kill you, your dead models pile in, you swing, they lose more than they gain. It's going to be punishing impatience, bad target priority, and players trying to delete your threats first. Fighting on death is going to weaponize sequencing mistakes, and here is really where it's going to go. I guess I should have combined Pro Play 2 and Pro Play 3, but this is where your high-level players are going to break games wide open. If let's say your opponent is charging with 2 separate melee units. Unit A charges and fights first. Unit B charges and plans to swing next. Here's what you're going to do. Let Unit A kill your Fight on Death unit. Your Fight on Death unit then fights back. Your dead models pile in. They hit Unit A. Often they're going to cripple it. They're going to delete it. Now you're going to spend 2 CP to counter offensive, combat interrupt, and then your second unit is going to activate into your opponent's Unit B. The result is going to be your opponent charged with 2 units, and both of them died in their turn, while you only lost 1. And this is how fighting on death can flip entire games, by compressing massive value into your opponent's turn and punishing aggressive players who don't respect your counter punch. So let me go through that real fast on TTS, and then this video is going to be basically over. So let me just click here. All right, ready? We're going to use this exact same scenario right here. So let's say one unit of Victrix Honor Guard counter, they charge into knobs number 1, and unit of Victrix Guard B charge into knobs number 2. This unit, Space Marine player's turn, they fight. The Orc player spends 2 CP to fight on death, so they kill the entire Orc player's unit, and the Orc player's unit kills, they should kill 5.9, so we're going to say they kill the whole unit, because that's basically how it goes. Then the Orc player is then going to spend another 2 CP to interrupt, and he's going to kill about 4 Victrix Honor Guard. Now, in this scenario, the Space Marine player can use his Armor Contempt, which he'd be smart to do so, which that would leave him with 3 instead of the 5. But then at that point, the Victrix Honor Guard won't have enough attacks to actually kill the knobs. And that is how an Orc player can actually get through things like this. And it doesn't have to be with Victrix. It can be with anything. I'm just using the Victrix as examples because they're the hotness right now. So using Fight on Death, you can effectively get 2 fights in a row. It's not actually 2 fight activations in a row because this unit was never technically selected to fight. It was just the models. But this is what you can do to completely ruin your opponent's chances at honestly winning the game. It's very, very powerful, and I hope you use it all the freaking time. So guys, Fight on Death is a very high skill mechanic with huge value potential. If you use it correctly, you're going to flip trades and you're going to punish those aggressive opponents. And that's such a big deal. Fight on Death is not a gimmick. It's a tactical weapon. Force trades, punish sequence mistakes, and let you delete multiple enemy units even when you die. What I want to hear in the comments down below is what unit you think abuses Fight on Death the hardest. I'm going to see you next time. Crump on. Bye-bye.